I was super lucky that Marcus, Joyce first, and then Lucy Stewart, who I met recording the Vietnam War stuff, and then Michael Spearing, and then my sister-in-law Kiwi McPheehan. They all kind of came on board and were really enthusiastic, and that was just awesome. Like, it was such a cool bunch of people to make music with, and yeah, it was just super fun. And it was totally, we could play 3 times a week or take a month off or whatever, and we could just, it was just totally, we wrote the script of how we were going to do it, and we self-recorded and we self-funded things. And yeah, it wasn't until the very end that sort of companies were involved, and even then they weren't heavily involved. And so it was a really great sort of liberating music making thing. And what I was just so completely blown away by was how people liked it. People came to the shows. And I mean, when I was writing that stuff by myself initially, I thought, okay, in a room of 100 people, 5 people might be able to handle this, and the rest will be like running for the door. And I thought, but I don't care, that's cool. If I connect with those 5 people, then that's great, better to have done it and shared it than not. But yeah, it was actually like people enjoyed it, and that was a really exciting thing, like people dancing and yeah, and feeling that release that I felt when writing it, and that was, yeah, it was really cool. And I thought that, having been in Supergroove would be a real, I don't know, and doing something different would be a real problem or something. I don't know, I suppose I felt like creatively there was this path which was what someone who is in Supergroove does post Supergroove, and I thought that was sort of scripted on some level, and that so I have to make trip hop now. That's the only thing that you can do after you've been in a funk rap rock band, and then it breaks up and you're middle-aged. But I didn't want to make trip hop, and weirdly I wanted to make strange surfy sort of punky rock and rolly stuff, and it was amazing first telling myself that was okay, and then discovering that no one in the audience comes up to you and says, shouldn't you be making trip hop? You're a middle-aged ex-Supergroove member. And so that was like, oh wow, you're allowed to do what you want creatively, and if people like it, then they like it, and if they don't, then they don't, and that's all there is to it. Being on stage with the Drab Doo Riffs was really fun. I mean, I'm a nervous person, and so being on stage, to be able to do it, I just sort of go into a weird frenzy of self-denial or something. I go into a weird place that I don't quite know what I'm doing or what I'm going to do next, and so was very fun after years spent in university libraries and seminars and conferences and waiting for your turn to read the ancient Greek text and translate it and say your thoughts about Plato. I mean, as much as I loved that world and it was amazing, putting your head inside the kick drum or whatever while it's playing, that's a different kind of buzz, and there's a different kind of freedom there. There's not very formal etiquette and stuff. And so performing the Drab Doo Riffs material personally was great, and they were such a great bunch of people. Performing with them was cool. I mean, they're just, yeah, it's so exciting to share a stage with them because they're all so such characters and have so much energy, and they're such great performers and great musicians. So yeah, it's really cool. And I guess the difference for me between that and Supergroove was Supergroove, we'd all grown up together in the same sort of area, same generation, all guys. And so as different as we are, there was kind of a shared perspective on some level. We went to similar schools and stuff. Whereas the Drab Doo Riffs, very different ages and backgrounds, and that randomness kind of energized things and made it cool. You just had no idea what someone's musical perspective was going to be on something, because they were, yeah, younger than you, or older than you, or whatever. So it felt very wacky, and that was a really positive thing. A nice change. I mean, the nice thing about Supergroove, by contrast, is it's more like a platoon or something. It's kind of that band of brothers kind of thing. You're all just so connected and so a team. Yeah. But it's different. Every collaboration is different, and that was cool to discover that, because I'd only ever collaborated with those Supergroove guys. With the Drab Doo Riffs, I don't know what musical taste we have in common. I mean, it was just so kind of chaotic and intuitive. It just sort of happened. Yes, with Supergroove, everything was this hard won thing where we had to teach ourselves and each other how to do this. With the Drab Doo Riffs, it all just kind of fell in a random heap, and everyone just went like, that's good enough, cool. Everyone in the band, was like, I believe in that. And that was, it was great. I wasn't even sure if it was music half the time, but it was. But it was just very natural. Didn't have to think about it. It was cool. Holding those Drab Doo Riffs creations in my hands was super exciting. And I think it was because we'd just done it from scratch ourselves, you know what I mean? As certainly that first 10-inch, we paid for it ourselves. I had to take a 10-inch record cover down to the pressing plant, and sort of we pulled it to bits so that they could make a cutter for a 10-inch album cover, because I'd never made 10-inch album covers before. So it was really hands-on in that way. I had to look up where you get 3D glasses from and order some online and all this sort of thing. So it was incredibly satisfying to have those 10 inches arrive. But it was the same with the CDs. That's the funny thing, is the first Drab Doo Riffs CD that we got pressed, and the ink didn't dry properly on the covers, and so it was all a bit smudgy and weird. You could sort of scrape it off with your nail. Because it was just us doing it, it made it so much more satisfying. And I think that was one thing I learned comparing that process with the Supergroove process. The Supergroove process, yes, we'd done the videos, yes, we'd done the artwork, but to get into the studio, we had to have this massive big record company funding the whole thing, and that just took some of the fun out of it. They are involved, and they're rightfully involved because they're paying for this thing. But the more they were involved, the less fun it was. And so the Drab Doo Riffs, whenever we made something, basically it was just us making it, and that made it much more fun. And that was the fun time with Supergroove too, was those early days of doing shows around Auckland and tours around New Zealand. And the more professional it got, the less interesting and fun it got. So Drab Doo Riffs was about sort of preserving that fun stage for as long as possible, and I feel that we managed to do that for as long as possible.